Every time there's a political crisis involving a president, two phrases start trending: impeachment and 25th Amendment. And in almost every case, most of the conversation gets both of them significantly wrong in ways that matter. Impeachment does not remove a president from office. The 25th Amendment was not designed for misconduct. No president has ever been removed through either mechanism. And understanding why that is true requires understanding the specific constitutional architecture the founders designed and the specific political barriers that make both mechanisms extraordinarily difficult to use successfully. I have 3 master's degrees in political science, criminology, and business. This video is a civics lesson. It is not partisan commentary. The process works the same regardless of which party the president belongs to. And every American deserves to understand it accurately. 5 chapters, 2 mechanisms, the honest constitutional picture. Chapter 1. Let's start with the most important clarification in this entire video. Impeachment is an indictment. It is a formal charge. It is Congress saying we believe this official has committed offenses serious enough to warrant a trial. That is all impeachment does by itself. Removal is a separate vote by a different chamber with a completely different threshold. And it has never happened to a sitting president in the history of the United States. The United States Constitution provides that the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment under Article 1, Section 2. The Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments under Article 1, Section 3. But no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present. 2 separate chambers, 2 separate votes, 2 completely different thresholds. The House impeaches by simple majority. The Senate convicts and removes by 2/3 supermajority. These are not the same thing. The Constitution specifies 3 grounds for impeachment: treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. Treason and bribery are relatively clear. High crimes and misdemeanors is where things get complicated. The phrase itself comes from English parliamentary practice and was already more than 400 years old at the time of the Constitutional Convention. The founders adopted it precisely because of its flexibility. They wanted a standard broad enough to capture genuine abuses of power, but specific enough to prevent Congress from removing any president it simply disliked. The scope of high crimes and misdemeanors has no formal legal definition. It has been developed case by case through the practice of impeachments over more than 200 years. A 1912 impeachment inquiry established that non-criminal conduct can constitute impeachable behavior. You do not have to commit a literal crime to be impeached. The standard is about abuses of power, violations of trust, and conduct subversive of constitutional governance. The founders designed this process this way deliberately. They wanted a check on executive power that required serious political consensus to trigger. Whether they calibrated that balance correctly is something we will return to. But understanding the design is essential for understanding why the system behaves the way it does. Chapter 2. Now that we know what impeachment is, let me walk through exactly how it works from beginning to end. Step 1. Investigation. Before the House votes on articles of impeachment, it typically conducts an investigation. In modern practice, this has been led by the House Judiciary Committee, though other committees have played significant roles. The Watergate investigation that nearly produced an impeachment of Richard Nixon was led by a special select committee. The investigation stage has no fixed constitutional timeline. Congress sets its own procedural rules. This stage can last weeks or months and involves gathering evidence, conducting depositions, and interviewing witnesses. Step 2. Drafting and voting on articles of impeachment. The committee's evidence gets assembled into formal charges called articles of impeachment. Each article describes a specific offense the committee believes meets the constitutional standard. The full House debates the articles and votes on each one individually. A simple majority of House members present and voting is all that is required to pass an article of impeachment. In a House of 435 members, 218 votes is typically sufficient. 3 presidents have been impeached by the House: Andrew Johnson in 1868, Bill Clinton in 1998, and Donald Trump in 2019 and 2021. Richard Nixon, the president most associated with impeachment in popular memory, resigned before the House voted. He was never impeached. Step 3, the Senate trial. After the House votes to impeach, it sends the articles to the Senate and appoints a group of House members called managers to serve as prosecutors. The Senate then sits as a court. When the president is on trial, the Chief Justice of the United States presides, removing the vice president from the chair, since the vice president would become president upon conviction. The Senate trial can involve opening arguments, witness testimony, evidence presentation, and questioning by senators. The Senate controls its own procedures and can limit or expand the process. Step 4, the Senate vote. The Constitution requires 2/3 of senators present to convict. 2/3 of a full Senate is 67 votes. That means you need substantial bipartisan support. Following conviction and removal, the Senate may also vote by simple majority to permanently bar the convicted president from holding future federal office. One additional thing most people do not know: the constitutional text does not clearly prevent impeachment of an official who has already left office. Donald Trump was impeached by the House in January 2021 after he had already left office. The Senate voted 57-43 to convict, which was the most bipartisan presidential impeachment conviction vote in history. It was still 10 votes short of the 67 required for removal. Chapter 3. No president has ever been removed through impeachment. 3 have been impeached, 0 have been removed, and that is not a historical accident. It is the product of specific structural barriers that make removal extraordinarily difficult under current political conditions. Barrier 1, the 2/3 threshold. 67 Senate votes to convict is a supermajority, specifically designed to require bipartisan consensus. In the founding era, this made sense. Senators were expected to exercise independent judgment based on the evidence presented at trial. In the modern era of almost total partisan sorting, 67 votes means you need somewhere between 15 and 20 senators to vote against their own party's president. That has never happened. Barrier 2, party loyalty. The empirical record is clear. Senators vote on impeachment almost entirely along party lines. In the first Trump impeachment in 2019, Mitt Romney was the only Republican senator to vote to convict, and he voted to convict on only one of the 2 articles. In the second impeachment in 2021, 7 Republican senators voted to convict. It was the most bipartisan conviction vote in history. It was still 43 votes short of removal. Barrier 3, political incentives. A senator in the president's party who votes to convict faces serious consequences. They become a target in their next primary. They are denounced by the president's supporters. They may lose their seat. The political cost of conviction is high and concrete. The incentive structure points almost uniformly toward acquittal. Barrier 4, the undefined standard. Because high crimes and misdemeanors is not a legally defined term, senators who want to acquit can always find a principled sounding argument that the conduct does not meet the threshold. They do not have to argue the facts are wrong. They can argue the conduct, however bad, does not rise to the constitutional standard for removal. This gives every senator a defensible exit from conviction, regardless of the evidence. Barrier 5, the speed problem. Presidential impeachment proceedings take time. The Johnson impeachment took months. The Clinton impeachment lasted through most of 98 and 99. The first Trump impeachment ran from September 2019 through February 2020. If a president is in the final months of a term, the political calculation shifts dramatically. The cumulative effect of these 5 barriers is a process that functions primarily as a political statement. The founders built removal to be hard. Whether they anticipated the degree to which partisan polarization would make removal essentially impossible, even for conduct that commands significant bipartisan condemnation, is a question the historical record cannot answer. but the result is a mechanism that has been used as a political tool more than an accountability one. Chapter 4. Every time there is a crisis involving a president's behavior or fitness, someone mentions the 25th Amendment. Let me tell you what it actually is, what it was designed to do, and why the section people are usually talking about has never been used. The 25th Amendment was ratified on February 10, 1967, after the assassination of President Kennedy highlighted significant gaps in the constitutional framework for presidential succession and incapacity. Before it existed, the Constitution was genuinely ambiguous about what happened if a president became unable to function but did not die or resign. The amendment has 4 sections, and they do very different things. Section 1 is automatic. If the president dies, resigns, or is removed from office, the vice president becomes president immediately and fully. This clarified an ambiguity dating to 1841, when John Tyler claimed to be fully president rather than merely an acting president after William Henry Harrison died. Section 2 fills vice presidential vacancies. When the vice presidency is vacant, the president nominates a replacement who takes office upon confirmation by a majority vote of both houses of Congress. This was invoked for the first time in October 1973, when Gerald Ford replaced Spiro Agnew after Agnew resigned amid a tax evasion scandal. It was invoked again in August 1974 when Nelson Rockefeller replaced Gerald Ford after Ford succeeded Nixon. Section 3 allows voluntary temporary transfer. If a president sends a written declaration to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House stating they are temporarily unable to discharge their duties, the vice president becomes acting president until the president sends another letter declaring themselves capable again. President Reagan used Section 3 during cancer surgery in 1985. President George W. Bush used it twice for colonoscopies in 2002 and 2007. Section 4 is the one that generates political discussion, and it is the section that has never been used for its intended purpose in more than 50 years of existence. Section 4 allows involuntary transfer of power when the vice president and a majority of the cabinet send a written declaration to congressional leadership stating the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office. The vice president immediately assumes those powers as acting president. But the president can resist. The president can send their own written declaration asserting they are capable. That immediately restores their powers unless the vice president and cabinet send a counter declaration within 4 days. Congress then has 48 hours to convene and 21 days to vote. 2/3 of both the House and Senate must vote against the president's capacity to keep the vice president in the acting president role. Section 4 was designed for incapacity, not misconduct. The standard is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office. This means physical or mental incapacitation, not bad judgment, not unpopular decisions, not actions you find unacceptable. A president who is acting badly is not constitutionally unable to act. These are different things. Second, the process must be initiated by the vice president and the cabinet. These are presidential appointees. The political cost of invoking Section 4 against the president you serve is enormous. No vice president has ever been willing to do this against a sitting president's will. After January 6th, some cabinet members reportedly considered invoking Section 4. Vice President Pence was asked by House Speaker Pelosi to do so. Pence refused. His stated reasoning was that Section 4 was not designed for political disputes, and that using it as a political mechanism would set a dangerous precedent. Removal under Section 4 does not by itself disqualify the president from holding future office. Unlike impeachment, where the Senate can vote to permanently bar a convicted president from future office, Section 4 removal carries no such consequence. Chapter 5. Let me put these two mechanisms directly next to each other because the comparison reveals the architecture of accountability the founders and subsequent framers built, and why that architecture has so far failed to successfully remove any president. Who initiates the process? Impeachment is initiated by the House of Representatives. The party controlling the House controls whether impeachment proceedings begin. This means the opposition party can impeach a president without any cooperation from the president's own party in the House. Section 4 of the 25th Amendment is initiated by the Vice President and a majority of the Cabinet. The President's own chosen team must be the ones to start the process. The opposition party cannot initiate it. Congress cannot initiate it. The public cannot initiate it. What triggers each process? Impeachment requires evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors. The standard is about misconduct, abuse of power, and violations of constitutional obligations. It asks, what did this person do? Section 4 requires a determination that the president is unable to discharge their duties. The standard is about present capacity and functional fitness. It asks, what can this person currently do? These are fundamentally different legal and political questions. The thresholds for removal. Impeachment removal requires 2/3 of the Senate, 67 senators. Section 4 removal requires 2/3 of both the House and Senate simultaneously within a 21-day window. That is 290 House members and 67 senators. In some ways, Section 4 sets a higher bar than impeachment because it requires a supermajority in both chambers at the same time within a compressed timeline. How fast the process moves. Impeachment can take many months from investigation through Senate trial. Section 4 moves significantly faster. The Vice President assumes acting president powers the moment the initial declaration reaches congressional leadership. The 21-day clock then runs. This urgency reflects the amendment's design purpose. If a president is genuinely incapacitated, the country cannot wait months for a resolution. Consequences of removal. If the Senate convicts following impeachment, it can then vote by simple majority to permanently disqualify the president from holding any future federal office. If the president is removed under Section 4, there is no automatic disqualification from future office. The realistic assessment, neither mechanism has ever successfully removed a sitting president. Impeachment faces the party loyalty barrier. The president's party almost never provides the votes needed for the 2/3 threshold. Section 4 faces the cabinet loyalty barrier. Presidential appointees have never been willing to declare their own president incapacitated against the president's will. Both mechanisms were designed in political environments with significantly more institutional independence and bipartisan cooperation than currently exists. They work on paper. They have not worked in practice for their most consequential purposes. Alexander Hamilton wrote in Federalist 65 that impeachment involved topics which occasionally become connected with pre-existing factions and would enlist the passions of the whole community. He recognized that the very process he was defending was vulnerable to partisan capture. What he may not have fully anticipated is the degree to which partisan polarization would make the 2/3 threshold essentially unreachable. Understanding both mechanisms accurately, what they require, who controls them, and what the realistic barriers to success are, is essential for anyone trying to understand American constitutional governance. Not as a political argument for or against any specific application, but as a factual matter of how the system is designed and how it actually operates.